We are Rogue Media Sports.
You haven't heard about the McCrispy yet? Well, then, you probably haven't heard the sweet silence after the first crispy bite either. Go try it for yourself to hear the best nut sound you've ever heard.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, is the Doomsday podcast, and Ed.
It is Doomsday.
Yeah, I think that's
it is Doomsday.
I think that is a very appropriate name, and we've seen some lackluster performances. This ranks right at the top. Ed comes to us right now, live as we tape this thing. Ed is at the in the press conference room where Mike McCarthy spoke, Dak Prescott, and then, of course, right outside those rooms is where Jerry Jones addresses the media. And Ed kind of set the scene for us. This is moments after you've heard from all three of those folks. How bad does this look? And then we'll get more into the Dak injury, but how dire does this whole situation seem like after talking to everybody?
Well, to put it into some context, after the 19-3 loss, the Cowboys are the only team in the NFC East that took that they're the only team in the entire NFL that played today that failed to score a touchdown. They were the highest scoring team in football last year, the only team on Sunday to fail to score a single touchdown. And then you go in the locker room, and you recognize they've lost their quarterback for some period of time. This will be the third straight season that Dak Prescott misses regular season games. And in the locker room, I stood there and kind of looked around. It was really somber, as you might expect. Dak was, dressing very slowly and required the assistance of two staff members to button his white dress shirt because of the fact he suffered a fracture near the thumb on his passing hand. Then you look over to the right and you see Connor McGovern sitting in front of his dressing stall, and he's got a boot on his right foot. That's another starting player on offense. And then down the hallway, from the training room, here comes J-Ron Curse, the team's lead tackler last year, starting safety. He's on crutches. And so that was kind of the behind the scenes in the locker room after this game. Jerry, he wasn't overly pessimistic, but he's the general manager. He's responsible for the roster that Cooper Rush now inherits for however long Dak Prescott is out. And it looks like their plan to believe that Dak Prescott could play with anyone and elevate anyone around him to his level just because he was a $40 million quarterback was an abject failure. And that will look even more obvious with a player of limited ability like Cooper Rush taking over at quarterback.
Well, I agree, and I did get to hear some of Jerry, and I heard you say, because you were having to cover all kinds of different press conferences, and you had to run over and talk to Jerry, and you said, hey, can you clarify? And Jerry, as only Jerry could, he said something along the lines of, I really don't want to get into specifics, but it is a tendon below the thumb. He starts walking you through the actual. So Jerry went over that about 3 times after saying, well, I'd really like the medical people to speak to that, but it is a fracture and it's the joint below the thumb. So we'll get even more. We'll dial down on that. And I think by tomorrow, we'll probably have a better timetable on just how long he'll be out. All right, it is the Doomsday podcast coming up. In fact, we've got a very special and exciting announcement to make about a new sponsor. Frito, please play the music. lots to get into. Ed, I did want to start today, though. I got something very exciting for you. I had tipped you off on this and maybe even hinted on via Twitter, but we now have a new presenting sponsor of the Doomsday podcast, and we've had various sponsors over the years, and we'll have more this year. But I'm so excited because this is a guy that I really, really have liked for a long time. He's from Waco. His family's from Waco. Okay, so you know he's got Baylor ties, Ed. I mean, it wouldn't be.
I knew that already.
It wouldn't be me. Of course, I'm wearing my Baylor old Sailor Bear T-shirt as I do this. Marable Homes, and just recently named, Ed, one of D Magazine's best builders, family-owned, custom home builder, timeless classic homes in the Dallas area, and a great team equipped to handle luxury residential construction. Blake Marable is the friend I was referencing. And, Ed, you've been in my neighborhood, and some of the homes going up are just gorgeous, and you just constantly see Marable Homes. And when he says custom, the thing I love about it, he'll do it, just like custom means. He'll do it how you want to do it, and people swear by him. So I'm telling you, lots of homes going up right now, and we could not be happier to welcome Marable Homes. Blake Marable, his wife Amy is great. Whole family is. And Ed, they're huge sports fans. So, and they're fans of yours. They're fans of Ed Werder. So, Ed, can you welcome Blake Marable and Marable Homes into the Doomsday podcast as only you can?
I'm certainly a fan of Blake's, more so now than ever before. And I also want to acknowledge that I appreciate, and I'm sure all of our hundreds of thousands of listeners would if they knew what I'm about to tell them, which is how hard you've worked for this moment and how dedicated you've been in trying to make sure that we're partnered in the way that we need to be to secure our future and to continue to put out outstanding products like we do on a weekly basis during the season. So thank you, Matt Mosley, and welcome Blake and family to the Doomsday podcast on a day where the term is just so appropriate.
It's very exciting. I was afraid after watching that game that Blake might change his mind. And I did assure him that the truth is, you got to be horrible or be great. You just don't want to be anything in between. And tonight they were horrible. This was a crash and burn situation. And, of course, everything is on fire tonight. Now, Ed Werder, who, as we just covered, is right now in the bowels of AT&T Stadium. He's just finished covering the press conferences. Ed, we'll hear from Jerry in just a little bit. But I wanted you to, now that you've kind of talked to everybody, what have you gathered? And as we get into it, we'll talk a little bit more about this performance, because what I don't want to have happen, we can't just brush over the fact that Dak had one of the worst performances of his career. After Ed, we were told, oh my gosh, he's feeling better than ever. Dalton Schultz, I think, told you guys, Ed, oh my God, I think he could knock a fly out of the air from 50 feet, whatever. Everybody was acting a penny, a fly. Okay, I'm just making stuff up, but he's been incredible. Oh my gosh, I was bragging on him to Colin Cowherd. Right. This guy's incredible, and he comes out tonight, and he was as bad as he's ever been. And boy, you and I have always been big Dak, supporters, and really have enjoyed watching him. Ed, this was before even getting the injury. I'll just put it to you. This was, because you're always good at perspective. This was about as bad as we've seen a quarterback, save maybe DiNucci against the Steelers or whoever that was against. He was awful, but he was expected to be awful. This was Dak on opening night. This was an embarrassing performance.
And speaking of opening night, the last time the Cowboys scored fewer than 6 points in their first game of the season was an inglorious 28-0 loss in 1989. It was the first game of the Jimmy Johnson era, the Jerry Jones era, It was the first game for Troy Aikman as a quarterback, and they lost 28-0 to the Saints. That's the last time they scored fewer than 6 points, and they only scored half of 6 points tonight. And it was a truly awful performance. Last year, Dak Prescott he led the league last year with 21 touchdown passes against the blitz. And the Bucs are the biggest blitz team in football last year. They had the highest percentage of blitzes in the league under Todd Bowles, who's still making the defensive calls. Well, tonight, Dak was horrendous against the blitz. And, they got a lot of pressure on him, and he didn't perform well. And so they were also 3 for 15 on third down. The worst third down performance of the Dak Prescott era, which is now into its 7th season. So, yeah, you're right. It was a horrible performance. Dalton Schultz in the locker room segues from talking about losing Dak Prescott to the other problem, which is penalties again. The Cowboys led the league in penalties, and tonight, Terrence Steele had 4 penalties on one offensive series. And as he said, every time we get something going, the damn penalties again. And that's just easy fundamental football. And Mike McCarthy said it wasn't going to happen again, and it happened again. But I think, and we can talk more about this because it's certainly going to be an issue for Cooper Rush even more than it was tonight for Dak Prescott. But when you go into a season, and you haven't played Noah Brown, a journeyman wide receiver, because you're protecting him for the regular season, and Dak Prescott's throwing to Dennis Houston, an undrafted free agent wide receiver in week 1, and he's playing because he's out for a third-round draft pick, Jalen Tolbert, that they had such big ambitions for when training camp started. I mean, they put Dak Prescott in a win situation tonight in this game. And like I said, their belief was he's a $40 million quarterback. He's going to elevate the play of everyone around him. That's not what happened. That's not what happened. And it's not going to be what happens when Cooper Rush takes over. In fact, I would probably argue with you if you argued against me. Presumably you will, because that's what almost everybody seems to do. But I would argue that at some point you might want to play Will Grier, because at least he's a dynamic player and an athletic player at the quarterback position. They're going to need somebody who can, create plays on their own. Cooper Rush is not that guy. He won a start in Minnesota last year, but it was a 1-game start, and he had Amari Cooper and Cedric Wilson and Tyron Smith. So, yeah, it was easier to play. It was a great win and a great performance by him, but he doesn't have that kind of talent around him now. And is everything you saw tonight going to be fixed by Michael Gallup coming back? Mm-mm. Not even if Dak Prescott was still here would I think that was the case.
Yeah, the Will Grier, and that tells you the desperation of this. And we'll get into maybe some of the possibilities. People are going to talk about Jimmy Garoppolo. Could you get Fitzpatrick out of retirement? But it speaks to the desperation that Will Grier, you're right, compared to Cooper Rush, and even compared to that mess we saw tonight, Will Grier kind of seems dynamic. He does have some arm talent, but there's a reason the Cowboys were able to sign him. It's not like they traded for him or anything. They picked him up from another team, and I remember him when he was at West Virginia, and he's got some ability. But I don't think they're going to run off a bunch of wins with Will Grier. And they've left themselves in this position. Now, Ed, you made the comment that Dak's trying to get this done with an undrafted free agent. Over Jalen Tolbert, as you said, they had Dennis Houston, Noah Brown. They treated this preseason like he was some kind of star. He was treated
Michael Irvin.
Yeah, it was like he's right. He's like one of their top players or something. I thought they were going to try to hand.
And when would you think back with me? When did we hear them talk like this once before? Oh, I know. Mm-hmm. It was in 2018 when they said they didn't need a lead receiver after they let Dez Bryant go with no heir apparent. And that was such a disaster that they had to give up their first-round pick to bring in Amari Cooper and save their season and go to the playoffs. So the situation they created with Dak, they had already tried that once before, and it was a horrific failure. And it's just as monumental a failure now, except the fact now they're not even going to have Dak Prescott be the quarterback. And, Dallas is, I think this will be, let me think. He's missed 12 games since 2020. He started the first 69 games of his career without interruption. And now, as I said, he's going to miss games every year for 3 years. He's already missed 12 games since 2020. He missed 10 with the ankle fracture. He missed 2 in 2021 last year. And Dallas is 5-7 in those games, and they've averaged 21 points a game without Dak Prescott. So that's the situation. Now, their defense, I mean, they could have won the game tonight based on how well their defense played. I mean, Tampa Bay was the second highest scoring team in football last year. They have a 7-time Super Bowl winner at quarterback. They had Julio Jones. They had Mike Evans. They had Russell Gage. They had Chris Godwin. I mean, they had questions on the offensive line and became even more so during the game when they lost their left tackle, Donovan Smith. But the defense did a tremendous job tonight, but they still had no chance to win the game. No. The defense can't do enough unless they score to win the game.
I was thinking that tonight. I almost tweeted that, Ed. You probably did at some point. Like they really needed them to score, and last year's team became a scoring team. I mean, think about when they got that interception, and Donovan Wilson has a really nice interception. Brady's disgusted. It's midfield. And there's 12, 13 minutes left. Technically, as silly as it sounds, they're 2 scores down because they could get the 8 and the 8 to try to get back in the thing, and they didn't. It felt like to me, even before they went 3 and out, I thought they don't have a chance. They're not going to be able to do this. And then, as you pointed out, at some point there they are. They go 3 and out, and they've got a 4th and 8 at midfield, and they're down 19-3. And at that point, it was about 9 minutes left in the game, and McCarthy punts. And honestly, the reason I don't think anybody booed or was really going at McCarthy, now you question him on Twitter, is because of how horrible the offense was. Like, at that point, it was like, I think almost everybody in the stadium thought they didn't have a chance on 4th and 8. Like, that the punt might have been the best call. But it was just utter silliness to punt the ball there, yet I think they'd even lured the broadcasters into sleep because they didn't even bat an eye. They just thought, well, this is probably the right move.
They kicked a field goal on their opening drive and really never threatened to score again. And so when, like you said, they're down 19-3, kind of maybe early 4th quarter, there's under 10 minutes left. You're at midfield. Like, are you going to have a better chance to score? You have to score twice to tie. Isn't this your best chance in all likelihood? Isn't this probably got to be one of those scores? Like, you've already demonstrated you're not moving the ball far to score. So here you are at midfield. Yeah, it's unfortunate that you did nothing on the first 3 downs, and now you're in 4th down situation. But to me, that's your last shot. Like, we got to score on this drive. We're going for it.
Yeah, in late, I remember they said, well, you've got to make this play. You remember the back shoulder to Dennis Houston, and I'm thinking, and it was almost like the broadcasters were, I don't know if they're blaming Dak or the receiver, but I'm like, let's not put this on Dennis Houston. The guy pulls off a miracle to make the team. And, oh, by the way, the 3rd-round guy couldn't even get on the field tonight, and he's out here, and that's what you were depending on, that Dennis Houston was going to go down there and try to somehow get separation from these cornerbacks and safeties that can flat-out play. I mean, it's embarrassing how they did this. Now, Ed, we've got you and I have quite a few thoughts, but I also want to say that Ed's catching a flight out early as we tape this past midnight. Ed's got an 8:30 a.m. flight for the Monday Night Football game, which Ed, agreed to. They lean on him. They lean on Ed at ESPN.
I volunteered for this.
Wow.
I did this to myself.
You did this to yourself, but I do want to try to get you out of here at a decent hour. Well, it's not really decent, but just to be a little quicker than usual. So let's get to, right now, our stretch plays. Glenn Stretch Smith, Ed, as you might anticipate, there is a grade that he gave the offense that he's never given before. Here is our conversation with Glenn Stretch Smith. Stretch, it's great to visit with you again. We've missed talking these last couple of months. at least on this podcast. But this is the appropriate name for a podcast following that effort. It is the Doomsday podcast, and the quarterback is hurt. We'll deal with that, and we'll continue to deal with that throughout the podcast. But first of all, Stretch, I want to talk about the entire look of the offense. And you can give the entire offense a grade, and I think I might know what it would be. But this is, it was a lackluster performance, and it was stunning. And I guess I heard Jerry say something after the game, how surprising it was. And I guess that's accurate, except for we knew this team was thin at wide receiver, and it had issues with depth on the offensive line. And all that came to bear, Stretch.
Yeah, so I would ask you this, Matt, and it's almost like, when you handicap a horse race, don't tell me the horse that's going to win. Tell me the one that's going to run dead ass last. That's hard to do. But when you think about the reality is that they took a quarterback who they felt like was a franchise quarterback and decided not to let him play at all in the preseason. None. And that's exactly what you got tonight. You got a quarterback who was not ready for the speed of the game. I don't give a whiskey crap about whether he played 15 snaps in the joint practice or this or that. He was not ready for the speed of this football game. And guess what? It ended up catching up to him, and then he got hurt because he wasn't ready for the speed of the game. Shame on the organization and shame on these football coaches for what they did tonight and for that product that they put on the field, because I want to tell you something. That is completely unacceptable. I don't like making knee-jerk reactions. You know that. I'm not big into overreaction, getting into all of that. But the product that was on the field tonight for the Dallas Cowboys was awful. And there's just no other way to put it other than that.
Well, I want to delve more into what you just said, the speed of the game. There was some, Thursday he misses practice because of something with his ankle, and it had something to do with his shoe, and they kind of laughed it off, said everything was fine. Last year, you were quick to, and I think you accurately, one of the first people to see that he had some physical things going on. I don't know. This didn't seem to be physical. This seemed to be a guy, like you said, who just wasn't ready to go. The throws that were being made, when you were watching this and reviewing it on Channel 8 tonight, he was behind receivers. I mean, CD should have caught that one, but he was behind on that. And then let's just go with the interception. I mean, he sees the receiver. He floats that thing out there all night. Think about it. Levante Davis dropping back. Could have had an interception. The one that did get picked off, Stretch, it's like that was almost like something a rookie quarterback would do. And this guy is in, his seventh year?
Yeah, and I can tell you that the ball that he threw for the interception, Matt, was a curl flat. It was a curl flat read. That is a 3-deep beater because it puts the pressure on the linebacker to that side to either cover the flat, which is the player running the 5-yard flat, or it causes him to sit in the curl. You cannot throw that route versus Tampa 2 coverage. They were in Tampa 2 coverage. Now you're going to hear all the village idiots say, he threw it into triple cover. No, he didn't. He threw it right into Tampa 2. I'm talking about the simplest of reads that I promise you, my 10th grade son would tell you, he wouldn't even have looked at that. Had he known a curl flat was to his right, and had he sprint through the middle of the field to carry the middle of the field, I'll promise you Colby Jackson-Smith would not throw the curl flat. And the thought that you have paid this guy this kind of money, yeah, I'm going to tell you, if you're a Cowboy fan, you ought to have the red ass. Because guess what? I got the red ass watching it.
Yeah, it was it was one of the, and I looked it up a second ago, the final numbers. I mean, through much of the game, it was just so horrible to even imagine. Dak, ends up. Now he did have that option run that was about the only positive sign of the night for him. 14 of 29, 134 yards, and the interception. And it was 3-and-out city, and it was a lack of first downs. And what's interesting, Stretch, is that first drive looked pretty solid. I mean, they're moving the ball, they're doing okay, and then almost the rest of the game, it was just like they were in mud. They were getting behind the chains. It was bad. Now, how much of what happened? Part of the storyline going into the season has been the lack of receiving depth. Noah Brown. You got Dennis Houston, undrafted free agent out there, and then, of course, C.D. Lamb, who has a problem with dropping balls. What did you see from that wide receiving core?
Again, lack of speed, lack of ability to get deep. When you don't have the ability to press vertically the middle of the field and the outside numbers, then you saw what you saw tonight from a Tampa Bay defense, which they dropped to about 12 or 15 yards and they squat. And then you got very, very tight windows to fit the football in. You combine that with a quarterback who didn't play at all this preseason. He was not ready for this speed of the game. And the receivers and the lack of speed at wide receiver is really a problem. I like Noah Brown. I think Noah Brown is a tough – he'll do some things for you blocking on the perimeter. He's a tough guy. But then he is not going to stretch the field vertically for you. I like C.D. Lamb. He's a 2. I mean, Houston, okay. I'm all right there. Turpin, okay, he's fast enough, but he's real undersized. It almost feels like 2018 where this team, I apologize, just went by an 18-wheeler there that's shutting it down. It feels like 18 when this team had Hearn and Austin and guys that, couldn't run out of sight in a leap year. That really is what's going on here. And so I'm really, really concerned about the fact that they let Amari Cooper go. Now, okay, you could say money, you could say whatever you want to say, but they let him go. Now, all of a sudden, who's being held responsible for the fact that they let that guy out of the building? And who's being responsible for the personnel decision to say, hey, we're good enough out here to go play with what we got? Because those are the things that you've really got to take a look at. And then again, we go to the game plan. We go to, how they did with Ferguson and trying to line him up on the line of scrimmage, knowing that you've got to get some ability to run the football, some ability with Schultz behind him to kind of get a side of the ball that you can pick and feel good numbers-wise. I'm telling you, really, the game plan, really poor. And you're going to – I know how you are. You're going to say, okay, Stretch, will give us a grade. I ain't giving you a grade. I'm going to throw their ass out of school. That was as bad offensive performance as I've seen maybe ever for a Dallas Cowboy football team.
Wow, an expulsion. The Cowboys offense has been expelled from school. And that is about as bad a result as you can get from one of the harshest graders out there, Glenn Stretch Smith, but has always been a fair guy. Is always generally more upset with special teams than anything, but is very dismissive of this offense, and I think that's appropriate. Stretch, you said something about Ferguson. I did want to ask you real quick because people will kind of wonder. Tyler Smith. Early in the game, looked to be holding up okay over at left tackle. This was a nightmarish game for Terrence Steele, who I believe had 4 penalties. They were like all coming boom, boom, boom right there in a row, and it almost kind of went on a Posderic-like run. That was really, really bad. Did the O-line do anything to impress you at all, or do we expel them as well with everybody else?
Well, Well, like you said, I thought Smith for his first game, being thrown into the fire at left tackle, I thought he did some okay things. The thing that concerned me was McGovern, and I was concerned at the beginning of this year. I really didn't think I didn't think early on in the preseason. I thought this kid will be fine if they have an issue at tackle. If Tyron goes down, and he's gone down the last few years, I'm fine with moving him to tackle. My concern was inside. My concern was Biotish, McGovern, and when you saw how the minute McGovern went out, then they put this Farnock, I can't even pronounce his name. I mean, you could tell there's such a drop off there, and quite frankly, I don't even know how to tell you that I could come in and say and give you a good fair feeling of a grade, a good fair feeling of, okay, look, I saw something out of the offense that I feel good about. I didn't see a damn thing. I mean, it was bad. It was a bad game plan. It was poorly put together. It was poorly coached. They poorly managed the quarterback. They didn't play him in the preseason. I mean, throw their ass out. That's it. Throw them out of school. That's it. You're out for a while.
All right. They've been expelled from school. Frito, snap a picture, by the way, of what my hair's doing. I think Stretch would want to see this right now. I think he might have some comments, so go ahead and snap one of those. Things have gotten a little out of hand, Stretch. Now let's go over to the defensive side of the football. They were able to try to keep the Cowboys in it. In fact, it was a miracle that they were only down 12-3 at halftime, and they kept kind of stepping up in the red zone. In fact, Micah Parsons had those 2 sacks, and when they were getting close, I mean, he came racing off the edge. Overall, obviously, they got gashed in the run by Fournette. And they certainly, Brady was able to make some plays downfield. I'm thinking of Julio Jones for one. And then, of course, I mean, Mike Evans, the Aggie, made some plays as well. Overall, what did you think about the defense, in particular the pass rush?
Yeah, I'm going to start inside because I saw some really good things from Odigizua. I saw some good things, from Neville Gallimore. I like what you're seeing out of Hill. I mean, I really do. I think defensive line wise, you say they got gashed. You know what? I think it was a game plan thing. I think they underestimated the fact that Tampa's tackles were pretty good. Tampa did a nice job of saying we're not gonna run this ball in the A gaps, the B gaps. We're gonna get outside, and they were able to hit some runs. And like you said, they had. They did a nice job of running the power. They pulled the center some. So they, at some point you got to say, hey, those other guys are on scholarship too. I thought the defensive line played fine. I thought you saw exactly what Micah Parsons could do. I thought the secondary, I thought Wilson with a pick did a great job of stepping up in the A gap, showing the blitz. He bluffed Tom Brady, fell back into the slant, picked the football off. I saw the safeties get over the top. A couple times I saw Malik Hooker get up over the top on a double move. Diggs was able to close ground on that. So I really thought the defense played fine for you for really 2.5 quarters of football, and they just got tired. I mean, they just got gassed. When your offense is going 3 and out and 3 and out and 3 and out, you're going to get gassed. And I thought that's what you saw happen to the defense. But I think overall, defensively, coming out of that football game, you got to be somewhat encouraged with what the Dallas defense showed you, because they do have some speed. They got some guys that can roll in there inside. They can come off the edge a little bit. The secondary is better with Curse, with Hooker. To me, Wilson back there, I got no issue with what you saw from the Dallas Cowboy defense. I really don't. Again, it's almost like I can't get over the fact that it's as poor an offensive performance, Matt, as I've ever seen from a Cowboy team. And again, I don't want to overreact on a first Sunday night, but God, was that bad.
it feels like the season is over, and it's like one game, and part of that is how horrible the quarterback played. I think if the quarterback was healthy, though, there might be some thought that, hey, he'll bounce back. He's played well in the past, but now he does have a fractured thumb. It's above the thumb, according to Jerry Jones, and looks like he will be out for weeks. And we don't know exactly how many, but it's going to be surgery and a fracture. And I think Stretch, knowing that, and it's his throwing hand, obviously, I would be surprised if we saw him back, but before 4 or 5 weeks from now. So, given that, is there somebody out there that you can even think of? I mean, do you think they just have to? I mean, They seem to be in love with doing this internally. They didn't do anything to address the wide receiver other than bring Cavante Turpin in, and that wasn't really for the wide receiving core. That was a wild card who they hope will help in the return game. But at quarterback, do you think a week from today that they'll have somebody besides Cooper Rush, Will Grier, or even DiNucci, who they could bring back? Or will it be, somebody from that crew? I'm afraid they're just going to ride this thing out with Cooper Rush.
Well, I'd be afraid of that too. And even if they do decide to play Cooper Rush, you're going to have to get somebody in here. You're going to have to bring another quarterback in here. So the question is, do you think a guy like Ryan Fitzpatrick is a very smart guy? I mean, do you go down that road to see if you can get him out of retirement? I think they've got to be discussing all of those options right now. I don't know who else is out there. I would certainly look, at even a possible trade. I mean, for a backup, and I think that you do that, and you hope he comes in here in 2 weeks and can play. I'll tell you this. I mean, when you break your thumb, the pressure points on the football initially are your thumb and your middle finger. And then as the ball is released, the index finger is the last thing that comes off the ball. So that's that's something that I don't think, Matt, I think you could be looking at a 6-week scenario here. And I say that because, again, to put the pressure on that football and to be able to drive that football in tight windows, I don't see that quick of a turnaround. Now, I mean, I know he's a quick healer. I know I don't want to question the kid's toughness. I'm sure all that'll happen. And, yeah, let's start eating Tabasco every meal so you can grit your teeth and be able to get it out. But I'm telling you right now, you're right. I mean, it's hard to believe game one of a season we're sitting here going, wow, what are we looking at? But the bottom line is the other 3 teams in the NFC East won, and your ass is in last place right now with no quarterback. I don't see you getting out of that basement for a while.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, I brought up Jimmy G. Is there anything you could do with him? Obviously, he would be a major upgrade over what you have, I would think. Andy Dalton has actually played in this offense, and maybe you could go after him. On Fitzpatrick, I was just reminded, Stretch, that he has joined Amazon, and so he's part of that, I guess, their pre and post game, but that doesn't mean he can't come out of retirement and play for you. And of those people I mentioned just then, Garoppolo's obviously the most accomplished, but he's also the guy you'd have to give up the most for. I mean, he is a very credible backup, and and he may not be their backup much longer. I think the 49ers need him on that roster. So think about what you'd have to use to pry him away, which is like a second or third round pick. And while you do need someone, do you need someone that badly? I mean, to do that.
Yeah, again, it's you got to think whatever you do, whoever you get, it's going to take them 2 weeks to come in here and get up to speed. That I don't care who you get. So now we got to question, okay, if it's 2 more weeks for Dak, if we think he can make it in 4, it's not worth trading for Garoppolo. But they're going to have to get somebody. The question is, who do you get? And, I mean, I think you make an okay point. Andy Dalton's played in this offense, okay. Fitzpatrick, smart guy. I don't know where they go, but I'll tell you what, the thing that I can't, it's almost like I can't keep talking about, I can't say it enough, is I'm staggered that they thought it was okay to not play Dak Prescott in the preseason, and to go out there and see what I saw tonight. It really is. It is just, it's one of those things that I'll be shaking my head for a while.
Yeah, I think people copy each other, and in the past, McVay hasn't really played a lot of his starters or maybe even his quarterback, and they won the Super Bowl. So, but what you said is the correct point. They convinced themselves that these joint practices were like some kind of huge deal, and that was just as good as a preseason game. And maybe it's a cheap second guess at this point, but that was pathetic. I don't know if we blame it on the preseason, blame it on whatever, but the guy was not ready to go, and that's probably among the 2 or 3 worst performances of his career. I mean, that's about as bad as you can play at the quarterback position, and I don't think we can sit here and blame it all on Terrence Steele or blame it all on Tyler Smith. It's on him. And Tampa Bay was not punching it in. They got one touchdown in this game, and 1 going away. Cowboys had the ball at midfield, and with time left, they got that turnover, and it was like 10 or 11 minutes left, and they had no chance from midfield, 3 and out, and it's over. But there you go. I thought you'd gone through under a bridge or something. Stretch, that was good. I think what you said was fair, and I think throwing the offense out and just throwing them out of school for a little while is maybe the way to go here. But I appreciate your perspective.
Well, and I appreciate Frito, taking a picture. He said you look like Rick Springfield, so I'm sure that. I'll try to send a $20 bill over there so you can get a haircut. I don't know what's going on with you these last few years. You're still blaming it on the pandemic for the fact that you think it's okay to walk around looking like a mutt with your hair like that. So, you can't wonder why the Cowboys offense is playing bad when you look like a mutt.
I kind of like this new Tom Brady haircut that he's going with. I don't know if you noticed what he's got, but I may finally about ready to chop it off. All right. I've kind of got a Dana Holgerson look. Did you see Dana the other day, by the way? Have you seen that is some mess. You talk about some mess. It's so long at the back, and he's got, he's lost his hair in the front. It's just such a nutty professor type look. All right, Stretch, we appreciate you and encourage everybody to watch you every Sunday night at 10:30 on Sports Special, WFAA Channel 8, and then, of course, the Doomsday podcast. And we've got very exciting news that we're announcing tonight, Stretch, so stay tuned for the Doomsday podcast. Appreciate you. All right, and there was Stretch, and with an expulsion. He just threw the whole offense like out of school, and they've just been expelled. I don't know when they can come back. I don't think we agreed upon that. He like you found a few things to brag on the defensive side of the ball, but could not find really anything to support on the offensive side. So it was that part was embarrassing. Now, Ed, I did want to, because you were there with Jerry, and I've been listening to all the news conferences and reading everything, but give us an update, and a lot of people be listening as they drive. What's the latest on what you're hearing, not only from Jerry, but other sources that you have on Dak's thumb injury? It's a fractured thumb. Give us some details on that, and then Ed,
Okay.
to your best, to your best knowledge, give us some kind of possible timetable that we might be working with here for Dak's return?
Well, Mike McCarthy called it a significant injury, and Dak Prescott, when he did his press conference, had the hand in a black up brace, which he kind of tried to keep out of everyone's view. Dak said he expects to have surgery Monday, and he only referenced how long it'll be before he's back because he said it'll be several games, and it frustrates him because of how poorly they performed on offense. He would like to go back out next week against Cincinnati and erase that from everyone's memory with a much better performance. And now instead, he has to endure the anguish of being away from the game and that being his final performance for, who knows exactly how long. He actually said the specifics of the time won't be known until the surgeon assess and complete the repair during the operation tomorrow. He did say that the medical staff told him the fracture was much cleaner than it could have been. And quite honestly, that seemed like really the only positive news from a otherwise completely dismal opening night for the Dallas Cowboys.
All right.
And you just wonder how, this is a team that has an offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore. It has an offensive oriented head coach in Mike McCarthy. They've had 8 months to get ready for this game. And let's be honest, the Bucs are a good defensive team. Todd Bowles was here with Bill Parcells. Todd Bowles has made the Buccaneers over the past 3 years one of the best defenses there is in the league across the board. They do everything well. They play the run well. They rush the passer well. They create turnovers. So they were up against a good defense. There's just no realistic excuse for how poorly the Cowboys played and how little they, Mike McCarthy has said multiple times about, hey, this is, the league's all about quarterbacks and explosive plays. And the Cowboys had none. They had nothing. I mean, Cavante Turpin, this guy they're talking, we're going to get him in space and he's going to create some plays. They used him one time early in the game on offense, and they ran an option play that Dak actually gained 12 yards on, keeping the ball. But they ran a bunch of gimmick plays. None of them worked. Did they ever get anything of consequence out of Tony Pollard? How does Tony Pollard not have any productive plays in the game?
No, 6 carries.
I just thought it was an across the board fail by the way.
Yeah, it was a failure. By the way, Ed's a little wonky because, again, he's below the field right now in the press room, but he's in via Zoom. But Ed's done a nice job. I just wanted to tell everybody. But Ed always sounds good, looks good, and Ed has now done about 12 hits today, 12 to 15 hits, including a late Scott Van Pelt. I mean, they just keep booking him. They cannot get enough. They got to get their pound of flesh. Okay, Ed, one quick thing I wanted to add also, another sponsor, and this is Lakeside Roofing. Lakeside Roofing in the Dallas area, family-owned, full-service roofing company. Go to lakesideroofco.com. Okay, so that's lakesideroofco.com. And you can also find them at Twitter at Lakeside Roof TX. And then, Ed, I would remind you that Marable Homes, you can find them at marablehomes.com. That's MARABLE, marablehomes.com. So very exciting to have these new sponsors as we new partners as we get going. And Ed, when somebody sponsors and becomes part of the show, they become part of our family, and they've been known to we'll welcome them right into our studio. And or Ed, we may, who knows, I may send them on this Monday night trip with you. I don't. But
hey, I feel I'm sure you feel kind of bad that our reporting has been so negative and the context is so bad. But I do want to leave you, if I'm so allowed, with some reason for our sponsors to stay with us, to believe that maybe despite what we've said here, Cooper Rush is going to pull this off. And let's say Dak's out 6 weeks.
All right.
Well, geez, you could lose games to every one of your division opponents between now and then. They play them all. And so a final point of context, the Cowboys 3 points tonight ties for the fewest season opener by a team that led the NFL in scoring in the previous year since 1970, the merger, 1970. But the other team that they just tied with that also led the league in scoring one year and scored 3 the next week or in the next year in the season opener, the Green Bay Packers last year. The Green Bay Packers last year lost 38-3 to the Saints and then still won 13 games and their division. Of course, they didn't lose Aaron Rodgers in week 1 like the Cowboys have lost Dak Prescott in week 1.
Yeah, I think did Aaron miss like one game or something at some point in the season? But you're right, probably not this stretch. But that is nice, Ed. I think our sponsors will appreciate that kind of thing. Ed, also one last thing. You and I both. Were a college tennis player. I played high school tennis, but lately I've been playing a lot of tennis, and I do a lot of drop shots and lobs that I think would frustrate you. But Carlos Alcaraz wins the U.S. Open at age 19. And, Ed, this feels like the next big thing in tennis. So I have just gotten caught up in this U.S. Open. I've watched a ton of it. The match against Sinner, I went to bed at midnight, and I thought Sinner had it. I really did. I thought, there's no way Alcaraz comes back. And the next day I find out Alcaraz did indeed come back. Tiafoe had a fun run. Been a lot of Kashinov. But I just wanted to give a shout-out because I know you're a big tennis guy. This Alcaraz, at least if you believe McEnroe, and I do, because he has a great feel for this thing, he seems to think this might be the next big thing. Like, this guy's going to win quite a few majors.
I'm still a big tennis fan. I go, regularly to the event out in Indian Wells in March, and my wife Jill and I watch it. And I played for a long time, not anywhere close to that level. But I tweeted during the week while I was watching Alcaraz in the U.S. Open. I said, what? I saw Rafael Nadal play when he was 16, and this kid reminds me of Rafael Nadal. Now he's 3 years older, but he's already won a major with the youngest since Pete Sampras. Youngest winner at the U.S. Open since Pete Sampras. So, I think this kid's got a huge career ahead of him. And now that tennis is done, maybe he'd want to come here and try out for the Cowboys quarterback position, which is suddenly open.
He is a speed demon. You talk about a guy that could cover some ground.
He can cover the court.
Ed, you and we may need to think about a tennis podcast. In fact, Blake Marable, our new partner, just got back from the U.S. Open, and he was there for that Kyrgios match. After the
maybe he'll take us next year.
That's right. Let's just appreciate that he's a partner. Let's not start asking him to take us on these junkets. But that's that he
never too early to plant a seed.
I know. I think that's fine. Ed, last thoughts. Cowboys getting ready for the Bengals. Bengals were in a wild one today, but obviously with Burrow, that's a very talented team coming into town. Cowboys are likely going to have Cooper Rush starting. Now, I think fans will want to know, okay, what could you do? What could you do at quarterback? Ed, any of the names? Let me throw out a few to you. Fitzpatrick, who's now on the pregame show or postgame show for Amazon. Jimmy Garoppolo, who, again, it seems unlikely unless this is going to be like an 8-week, unless this is like almost most of the season, then you maybe think about something like that. I think that's the one where you have to give up the most, okay, to get a guy like Jimmy G. Andy Dalton. Any other names come to mind, Ed, or would you almost prefer them to go this Will Grier route and maybe just to try something different because we do kind of feel like we know what they have in Cooper Rush?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on, what the time frame is for Dak's return. If he misses 4 to 6 weeks, I don't see them making a move. If he's going to miss the whole season and Dr. Jerry ruled that out, saying he wouldn't miss the whole season. But he also said the same thing about Tyron Smith, and I'm not so sure he's right about that one. We'll see. But if it's only 4 to 6 weeks, I mean, they could still come back from that and make the playoffs. It's going to be a lot harder to win the division now. But I don't know that they're going to make a move. And who can they get? What would they possibly give up? I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo costs too much money. Are you really just going to make a deal to have this guy for the rest of this year? He doesn't know your system, doesn't know your terminology. Is he that much better than, I mean, he's been to the Super Bowl and he's been to an NFC championship game, but he kind of plays the same game that you got to create throws for him. He doesn't throw people open. You have to create schematically opportunities for him to deliver quality passes. But I just don't know that there is a real good solution available to them out there. And Joe Burrow comes in here. Cincinnati's, upset that they lost to Pittsburgh today. But, Joe Burrow, I mean, you can beat Joe Burrow. He had 5 turnovers today. That's why they lost. So their offensive line gave up the most sacks in the NFL last year, even though Burrow took the Super Bowl. Incredible feat. He's a great player, but beat his offensive. Dan Quinn's got to beat his offensive line and take the ball, and they've got to create some short fields for an offense that's going to need all the help it can get.
No, forget short fields. They've got to score touchdowns. And Ed, too many times this team, I was just jotting down some names where the Cowboys have been stuck with bad backup situations. Brandon Whedon comes to mind. There was the one year that I think Jerry, the most upset he's ever been with Jason Garrett, was when Romo got hurt and they had Brad Johnson as a backup. And, Garrett had coached Johnson or been friends or something with him, and he was not ready for prime time. He was checked down. By that point, he was checking everything down. So they do get caught in this situation quite a bit. Now, not every team has a great backup, but it just seems like the Cowboys, the only time I ever felt like they truly were in pretty good shape at backup in the recent years, I thought Kitna was a good backup, and I actually thought Kyle Orton was an okay backup. Otherwise, they've really left themselves in a compromised state at that position.
I thought it was when they had Bernie Kosar myself, but I'm gonna run through this list for you. I tried to leave the show on an optimistic note, and now I'm not going to be able to do that.
That's okay.
Because now I've got to look at this list, and the Cowboys' backup quarterbacks, other than Romo and Dak, to start since Romo's first NFL start in 2006. Here's the list: Andy Dalton, John Kitna, Matt Castle, Brandon Whedon, Brad Johnson, Kellen Moore, Garrett Gilbert, Ben DiNucci, Kyle Orton, Stephen McGee, Cooper Rush. Combined record, Mose, what do you think it is? 12-25.
Well, that is an ugly way to end. But
I tried to do it a while ago in a much more pleasant manner, but
I know
I was not allowed to depart under those terms.
I know you're ready to depart because you're departing very early tomorrow morning.
Boarding soon.
Yeah. Boy, I hope your flight goes well. And these flights are almost always on time. Nothing ever goes wrong. So I think it'll be just fine, Ed. All right. By the way, try every once in a while. You ought to go over there to Love Field and check that situation out. I feel like you haven't done that in about 20 years. Some of us still try that out. All right, it is the Doomsday podcast, and thank everyone who's been a part of this one. Thank you, Blake Marable. Thank you, Marable Homes. So excited. Lakeside Roofing. We are off to start. I know it's a great start because what the Cowboys did, but the Doomsday podcast, we just tell it like it is. Thanks to Ed, thanks to Glenn Stretch Smith for Frito Nation Productions, Mark Frito Friedman. I'm Matt Mosley. Good night from far north Dallas.
You haven't heard about the McCrispy yet? Well, then, you probably haven't heard the sweet silence after the first crispy bite either. Go try it for yourself to hear the best nut sound you've ever heard.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl, and some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.